Hi, APE students. Welcome to video 3. It is going to be on an intro to environmental science, some key concepts that we're going to talk about throughout the semester. So the things that you should be able to do when you're done with this video is to explain the variables measured in an ecological footprint, what goes into it, and explain the concept of sustainability, which we've been talking about quite a bit now over the Unit 1. So, what is environmental science? So, environmental science is different from being an environmentalist. Environmentalists are people that really care about the environment. They probably have an ecocentric worldview. They think that life and plants and animals should exist regardless of whether or not people are here, not necessarily that they are useful to us. An environmental scientist is someone who actually studies the natural world. They tend to be environmentalists, but they aren't always. And a lot of times, environmentalists are not environmental scientists. So just make sure you know the difference between those two things. So we say environmental science is interdisciplinary. What that actually means is that there's a lot of different disciplines that go into it, a lot of different things that need to be taken into account, and a lot of different people that need to be kind of advised on these things. So you have your sciences, you have things like biology, ecology, chemistry, physics, but then you have also like some cultural studies like anthropology. You have people who are into economics, you have political scientists, and then you have philosophy and ethics, which we've also talked about as well. So you have a lot of different things that have to happen and kind of coexist in environmental science. So here's an example of that. Say a community wanted to use coal for their electricity. An economist might have told them that that was a good option. So that would be kind of looking at the money side. To mine the coal, you would consult a geologist. To get the coal transported to the facility, you would consult an engineer for roads and rails. When you burn it, it releases pollution, and kind of the way that that pollution interacts with the water in the atmosphere will be a chemist. When that rain falls, that would involve your meteorology studies. And then the effect that that acid rain would have on plants and animals would be the ecologist side of things. And then kind of going into all of it to try to pass laws to require that plants are not polluting as much, that would be how politics comes in. So all of these things are things that we're going to be talking about throughout the course. So our goal is to have a more sustainable world. You will see this quote quite a bit. So meeting the needs of the present without compromising the future. Basically want to make it where all of the resources we have available today are still going to be available 100, 200, 500 years from now. So that would be a sustainable world. So what do we mean by sustainable resources and how we can, what things can we manage sustainably? So you have your natural resources, which are things like air, water, soil, rocks, minerals. Those are all your natural resources. Then you also have natural services, and together that goes into what we would call our natural capital. Natural services are going to be things like trees give us fresh air, for example. Trees also provide soil stability so that there's not soil erosion. So these are things that if we took the tree away, we would then have to pay for the service ourselves. So looking at some environmental problems that we see, it centers around population growth. The more people you have, typically speaking, the more environmental problems you're going to have. So today's population is around 8 billion people. In the U.S., we're about 330 million. And then we see some issues that come with having that many people. So sustainable resource use or unsustainable resource use. We're seeing impacts on climate change. We're seeing impacts to habitats, and we're losing lots of biodiversity. And it will probably increase with the more people that we have unless we can change some things around. So one of the things that you might see in regards to natural capital when you go to the grocery store is you'll see differences in prices of things, for example. So one way that you can try to make things more sustainable is you can actually charge people for the cost that goes into some of these resources and natural capital. So for example, tuna, fish, they're swimming around out in the ocean. They have their own ecosystem. They're providing a lot of services within the ocean itself. But when you go to Walmart and get a can of tuna, you're not paying for the loss of those services. Because the companies themselves are not paying for the loss of those services that the tuna provide. So you're paying 99 cents at Walmart, whereas if you go somewhere like Whole Foods, people joke around about being called whole paycheck because it seems like you're using your whole paycheck. Why are you paying so much more? Well, you're paying more because the companies that are selling products at Whole Foods are actually including the loss of the natural capital that went with the fishing of that tuna. So whatever destruction happened to the habitat, that's also included in the price of that tuna. So that's the reason why these things are oftentimes so much different prices from different companies. So when we look at different countries, you can see a clear difference. This is the difference between developing and developed countries. Most of the world's population is living in a developing country, and they're not using very many resources. So you can see here that the red is the developed countries, the yellow is the developing. So most of your population centers are in developing countries. You also notice that the population growth is a lot larger in these countries. Although when you look at the income and the resource use, that's very much skewed towards the developed countries. And that's true. It's been true for a while now, and it will continue to be true. So they're using more resources. They're polluting more, typically because of that resource use as well. And then here's kind of another difference in the divide. You can see a little bit of difference. You'll see differences in life expectancy between developed and developing countries, although it's not nearly what it used to be. So there's not that much of a difference compared to what we used to see 50 to 100 years ago. But you'll notice that a lot of these developed countries are going to have a lot more resources. They're going to have a lot more pollution. Carbon dioxide emissions are a lot higher. They're going to have a lot more waste than the developing countries. And then finally, what really goes into your footprint? So what kind of impact do you have in your lifestyle? So the definition for ecological footprint is the amount of land required to sustain your lifestyle. And if everyone lived like we do in the US, we would only have enough land to support 1.3 billion people. Now, we just said there were 8 billion people. So there are countries where they're actually using less than one Earth. And therefore, the countries that are using more than one Earth kind of end up, kind of stabilizing that out a little bit. So completely sustainable would be one Earth. But if you lived in a developed country, the likelihood of you actually being able to do that is a lot smaller. So you'll notice that most of these countries up here on the list are above that one. Australia and the US are some of the highest ones. India, though, is below the one. So that means that even though India has a really large population, the average person in India is living a lot more sustainable lifestyle than someone in Australia or the US. The average globally is about 1.5 Earths. So that means if we continue this lifestyle throughout the next 100, 200 years, we're going to be losing a lot of those resources because it's just not a sustainable lifestyle. So that's it for this video. Please don't forget to take the quiz on Canvas and then bring any questions that you have to class.